A round of shots. It sets the pace for a big night out. But do you know where your drink is from? The growing market share held by underground counterfeiters means you may not know whose wallet you're filling or what you're downing. Over the last 12 months, 6.7 million litres of spirits were seized because they were fake or the relevant taxes had not been paid on them. Just last week in East London, 2,700 counterfeit bottles of vodka were seized. In November 2008, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs arrested 26 people and dismantled a fraud estimated to be worth £60 million a year. Last September in Haringey, a raid on 4 warehouses dismantled an industrial-scale fraud. Nearly 1,000 bottles were seized. This is Meridial Das, a 31-year-old chemist from Manchester. He was convicted last Christmas for leading a gang of vodka counterfeiters. He bought 100% ethanol and used it to manufacture his own vodka and whiskey in a warehouse in Oldham. And then he faked genuine labels to make his concoction look like the real deal. The alcohol was bottled and shipped out nationwide by the lorry load. He earned £10 million through his illegal distillery. These busts were part of HMRC's Tackling Alcohol Fraud strategy. It was launched in 2005 and intended to combat spirits fraud. Just one problem with it: spirits fraud has increased every single year since it was introduced. The government's most recent figures on spirits fraud are 18 months old, so they only go up to 2007. They show that in 2005, spirits fraud accounted for up to 7% of the market. In 2006, that proportion went up to 10%, and by 2007, it was up to 12%. That market share is worth up to £450 million in evaded duty. The bulk of that is vodka, according to a man we spoke to from the spirits industry. He was only willing to talk to us anonymously because of fears that he might offend the manufacturers who are notoriously protective of their brands. So why is vodka an attractive option for counterfeiters?
Certain types of industrial alcohol are relatively easy to purchase. White spirits are inevitably easier for fraudsters to utilise. As vodka is essentially clear and tasteless, it is particularly attractive to both fraudsters and potential purchasers.
To bring the official figures up to date, we collated all the news reports and warnings published about counterfeit vodka since 1996. 2008 shows a massive increase in the size of the problem. So why has this scam become so popular? As you might expect, it all comes down to cash. A 700ml bottle of vodka costs around £10. £7 of what a consumer pays in a shop is actually tax. That leaves £3 for production costs and profit. But if you dodge the tax and charge the full £10, the profit goes through the roof. Because counterfeit vodka production is not carried out in regulated conditions, criminals can fill the bottles with anything. Industrial strength chemicals are a popular shortcut. And what's more, the distillation of illegal vodka can produce a very high level of methanol. Whilst this appears in small amounts in legitimate spirits, the quantity is tightly controlled. That's because too much methanol can cause kidney problems, blindness, comas, and death. We tracked down one family whose son died last year after he drank toxic vodka he'd bought at a market, but they felt it was too soon to talk about it in public. Trading Standards are the frontline enforcement body in the fight against counterfeiters, but they don't have the powers afforded to police officers, and that can hamper their enforcement efforts.
We don't have arrest powers, sadly, but that would allow us to, A, to protect ourselves, also to make arrests and restrain people. We have basic powers where we've got powers of entry and powers of seizure, and we're able to see from the various sort of small seizures we make, say at a local market. We'll then follow it up the chain, and as we investigate it, for instance, the people's homes that you end up raiding and their warehouses get bigger and bigger and bigger, so you can see it's fairly well organised.
So with these restricted powers, Trading Standards are asked to track down hardened criminals.
There are big links to other serious organised crime, such as drugs, guns, people smuggling. Interpol said that it's found links to terrorism. I mean, funding from counterfeiting has been laundered into the Middle East, for example. They've reported this both to the US and to the EU Commission.
And the IRA are in on the counterfeit vodka scene. They've been linked to sales in the north of England, and they're believed to have perfected a recipe for red label Smirnoff, which they manufacture using stolen industry equipment. Accused of running the IRA's counterfeit ring is Thomas Slab Murphy. One-time IRA chief, he used the proceeds from counterfeit goods to bankroll terrorism. Last October, he was ordered to repay £1 million of criminal assets that were linked to smuggling.
It's a bit like catching Al Capone for tax evasion. If you can get a counterfeiter just on counterfeiting, you're going to find that he links into a whole lot of other really, really big stuff.
Organised crime relies on a distribution network to sell dodgy vodka, and smaller businesses who are feeling the pressure to undercut big chains during the economic downturn are particularly susceptible to criminal dealers. This Home Office survey asked businesses in 3 high crime areas about their relationship with organised crime. They found that 1/5 of food shops and 1/3 of off-licences have been offered illicit alcohol by organised criminal gangs. The area around Archway Tube Station is one of London's crime hotspots. The authorities are always watching here, but it hasn't stopped the trade in illicit booze. Last Christmas, 3 of the shops in this area were stocking counterfeit vodka. In spite of multiple attempts, we couldn't persuade the shops to return our calls. Well, the managers didn't have time to discuss this on the phone, so we've come here to make it easier for them and talk about it face to face.
Hi, we're journalists from City University. Hi, we're journalists from City University. We just wondered if you could answer us some questions about why you were stocking counterfeit vodka.
I explained the court, I explained everything.
Yeah, you said everything you want to say in court.
Yeah, I do.
I talked to you about the counterfeit vodka you were selling here last Christmas. You don't want to talk? You don't want to talk about it?
I think we're done. This is going on across the country. We wanted to know which government minister is in charge of dealing with it. Since counterfeiting is a form of intellectual property theft, we thought we might try the intellectual property minister.
I'm sorry to say, with the frequency with which the IP minister has changed, we've had 3 since the post was created 2 years ago. The 3rd is now David Lammy, who seems very interested, but his portfolio includes higher education. So he's got higher education as well as the whole of intellectual property to look after. And I'm afraid I don't think that means he can do justice to all of that.
There are several ministers who should have one eye on counterfeit crimes. Gareth Thomas is responsible for consumer affairs, but he may be a little short of time with a ministerial portfolio that includes international development and trade. So perhaps the new Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, well, he inherits a famously overstretched department, so maybe not. It's also an issue that ought to concern Chancellor Alistair Darling, but it's likely that he has 1 or 2 other things on his mind at the moment, like the economy. One man who does specialise in this problem is Lib Dem Treasury spokesman Vince Cable. In 2002, he successfully carried a private member's bill through Parliament to strengthen the penalties for counterfeit crimes.
There is now a framework of criminal law in place to provide necessary sanctions, but the basic issue, as in many other areas of life, is enforcement. Because a lot of the enforcement activity rests with council trading standards officers, and council trading standards officers are not one of the statutory obligations of local councils.
There are signs that the government are beginning to wake up to the scale of this problem. They recently announced a rethink of the tackling alcohol fraud strategy, conceding that the response to date has not been up to the task.
The new customs alcohol strategy is currently out for consultation. Replies from companies are only just beginning to come in, and further consultation is yet to take place with HMRC.
So this change of tack is still a long way from filtering down to the trading standards officers on the front line.
Most of my colleagues in the trading standards field consider that we should have more resources pumped into us, not to pay for greater salaries, but just generally because there is so much work out there.
The challenge now facing the government is to coordinate a response to a crime that exploits the limitations of local enforcement. The production and distribution of counterfeit spirits has spread right across the UK, and that's largely a consequence of a lack of awareness about the nature of the problem. Of course, some people are very happy about this. The unscrupulous shop owners and organised criminals who continue to profit from the trade in toxic booze.